All right, so get this. We're diving into the world of Abdulrazak Gurnah, this incredible author who won the 2021 Nobel Prize in Literature.
And what's really captivating about him is how his own life story, like particularly the experience of exile, is so deeply intertwined with his writing.
It's like, you've provided us with his Nobel lecture, a whole biography, even the speech from when he won the prize. It's like piecing together a puzzle of a life you know. Okay, close your eyes for a second and imagine this. You're a teenager. Suddenly you're forced to flee your home, leaving everything familiar behind. That sense of displacement, of carrying only memories. That's where Gurnah's story begins, both personally and as a writer.
It's interesting you use the word puzzle, because his upbringing itself was this fascinating mix of influences. Growing up in Zanzibar, he was surrounded by Arabic poetry, Islamic tradition with the Quran, but also Shakespeare.
Wait, Shakespeare and Zanzibar, that's a combo I wouldn't have pictured.
Exactly. And it speaks to the cultural tapestry that shaped his worldview. This wasn't your typical literary upbringing, and you see that reflected in the layers of his work.
So we're talking about a childhood steeped in rich storytelling traditions, but then things take a turn right. Tell me about the Zanzibar Revolution and how it impacted him.
Right. In the mid-1960s, Zanzibar went through this tumultuous period. The Revolution of '64 unfortunately led to the persecution of specific ethnic groups, including Gurnah's own.
So this wasn't just some historical event happening in the background for him. It directly upended his life.
Absolutely. At just 18, he was forced to leave his family and flee his homeland. Imagine the impact of that experience. Becoming a refugee so young, it's no surprise that this sense of being uprooted, of displacement, became a major force in his writing.
It's almost like his author's voice was born out of that experience.
Precisely. He talks about how initially writing was pure joy for him, this instinctive act. But in England, after being forced to flee Zanzibar, it became something different. It became a way to grapple with the trauma of exile, the complexities of identity in a new land, and the lingering effects of colonialism. Writing became a necessity, a way to make sense of it all.
That's incredibly powerful. How our life experiences can so profoundly shape our relationship with something like writing.
And it's in those experiences, in that struggle to reconcile his past with his present, that we begin to see the recurring themes that define his work.
So when we talk about these recurring themes, is there one that feels particularly central? Like, if we want to understand Gurnah's work, we have to get this.
Oh, absolutely. The displaced individual, this figure that just pops up again and again in his books. And it's not just some abstract literary concept here. It's deeply personal. It's drawn directly from his own experiences, as we've been talking about.
Right. This isn't some guy who's just like reading about this from a distance. This is like in his DNA.
Exactly. And what I find fascinating is how he uses this theme to kind of push back against those simplistic narratives about colonialism in Africa.
Okay.
You won't find any romanticized versions of history in his work.
No, he's tackling these big, complex issues head on.
Yeah.
Which makes sense given, the weight of history that he's carrying.
Absolutely. And he does it through these incredibly rich and complex characters.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we've got to talk about some of his books.
Yes.
Where do we even begin?
I mean, so many to choose from, but I know there are a few that seem to be like touchstones for understanding his work.
Yeah. You're right. Novels like Pilgrim's Way, Paradise and Desertion, those are essential Gurnah reading.
If you had to give like a super quick, what's it about?
Okay, so Pilgrim's Way throws you right into the immigrant experience in England.
Okay.
Paradise transports you to colonial East Africa. You've got this young boy forced into servitude. And then there's Desertion, this sweeping story of love and loss set against the backdrop of Zanzibar's colonial past. But what connects them all? That search for belonging, the weight of cultural clashes, and how the past, continues to shape the present.
It's like his characters are always navigating these like liminal spaces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're caught between worlds.
That's such a great way to put it. And it actually reminds me of this fascinating detail from the Nobel presentation speech. They use this metaphor of the Nessus tunic to describe Gurnah's work.
Okay.
You heard of that?
Rings a bell vaguely. Greek myth, right? Refresh my memory.
Okay, so the Nessus tunic was this poisoned garment. It was given as a gift, but it ended up killing the person who wore it.
Oh, right.
And the speech uses this metaphor to show how even well-intentioned lies told to protect oneself or others can have these incredibly destructive consequences.
Okay, I see the connection now.
Yeah.
Because so many of Gurnah's characters are grappling with secrets, with these unspoken truths that kind of haunt them.
Exactly. Think about Paradise, for example. The young protagonist, Yusuf, is surrounded by secrets about his own past and the true nature of his relationship with the merchant who owns him. This web of lies meant to protect him in some ways ultimately causes him immense pain and shapes his entire life. It's like that poisoned tunic. It might seem harmless, even beautiful on the surface, but underneath it carries this devastating power.
It's such a vivid way to illustrate that tension between truth and deception and how those choices just ripple outward, you know?
And you see that playing out in different ways across all his books.
Yeah.
But even though his work deals with such heavy themes, it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
There's this incredible beauty and resilience that shines through.
It's about finding like a light in the darkness.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging the complexities of life, the immigrant experience, the ongoing struggle for identity, the scars left by colonialism, but also recognizing the enduring human spirit. There's hope woven into these narratives.
Which is what makes him such a compelling storyteller, right? He doesn't offer easy answers. He invites us to like sit with the discomfort, the ambiguity, and find our own meaning in it all.
And we can't forget he's doing all of this while flipping the script on those traditional colonial narratives.
Right.
Gurnah centers the experiences of those who have often been marginalized, forcing us to re-examine what we think we know about history, about culture, about power dynamics.
It's like he's saying these are the stories that haven't been told, and they deserve to be heard.
Precisely. And what makes his work so captivating is that it's not just about individual experiences, though those are rendered with incredible detail and compassion. He's also exploring these broader historical and social forces, showing how they shape individual lives.
So he's weaving these personal journeys against this larger backdrop of colonialism, displacement, like the legacy of empire.
You got it. It's like his characters carry the weight of history within their own stories.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he never hits you over the head with a message.
Yeah.
He trusts the reader to engage with these complex themes through the lives of his characters.
You get pulled into their world, get pulled into their hopes, their struggles, and you start to see things from a whole new perspective.
Exactly. And that's the mark of a truly great writer, don't you think?
Absolutely. So for our listeners who might be new to Gurnah's work, what would you say is the one key takeaway, that lasting impression you hope they leave with?
That's a great question. There's this line from Desertion that has always stuck with me. It says, "One story contains many." And I think that perfectly captures the power of Gurnah's writing. It reminds us that these narratives, these stories passed down through generations, shape how we understand ourselves and the world around us. They hold so much weight.
It's like we're all part of this giant tapestry, and Gurnah is urging us to look closer at the individual threads, those intricate details that make up the bigger picture.
And to remember that those threads aren't always smooth or perfectly aligned. There are knots, frayed edges, places where the colors clash, and that's what makes it real. That's what makes it human.
It's about embracing the messiness, right? Like resisting that temptation to simplify or to shy away from difficult truths.
Exactly. And I think in a world that often tries to force everything into these neat little boxes, that's such a powerful message. It's a call to approach these stories, these lives, with nuance and with empathy.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Abdulrazak Gurnah, what would you say to encourage our listeners to take the plunge themselves, to explore his work firsthand?
I'd say this. If you're looking for an author who will challenge you, who will move you, and honestly stay with you long after you finish that last page, Abdulrazak Gurnah is your writer. His books are a journey into history, into the heart of the human experience, and ultimately into yourself.
A journey well worth taking. And on that note, we'll leave you with that final thought. Happy reading, everyone.